Ghost in the New York City by Sharks Reading Glasses on AO3. Chapter 6. So Kindly Stop For Me. Danny was absolutely miserable when he made it back to the hotel. He wanted desperately to wait with Peter and Fido until Wade came back, but it was nearly 11 at night, and Jazz would be getting worried enough to call the police or their parents soon enough. He sent her a quick text to let her know that he was on his way back, mournfully climbing down the stairs to the first level with Peter behind him and Fido hanging on to his shoulder, chirping sadly into his ear. Peter had insisted he take a cab, even though the safe house was within walking distance from the hotel. Danny still didn't have enough energy to fly back invisible, and Peter was worried he could be mugged again if he walked. Before they made it out onto the street, Danny handed Fido over to Peter after nuzzling the shade in goodbye. Fido went dejectedly, but didn't resist when Peter hid them in his front hoodie pocket. They all went outside, and Peter hauled a cab, taking surlily to the driver to take Danny directly to the hell, and giving the cab 2 20s while Danny got into the car. He and Peter exchanged one last goodbye, Fido peeking out of Peter's pocket to give a tiny wave before the cab pulled away from the curb and made its way to the hotel. He stepped inside the hotel room. The table light in the middle of their beds illuminated the room, and saw Jazz sitting in the cushioned chair by the window, wiggling her hands together. She turned her head when he stepped inside and got up to walk over to him. She opened her mouth to ask him a question, but paused when she saw his pale expression and shaking hands. The last thing Danny wanted to do right now was talk, so he quickly kicked the shoes off by the door, rushed over to wrap her in a hug. Jazz held her arms out for a few seconds before returning the hug, gently guiding them to sit on the bed. Danny felt like he wanted to cry to his core, bask in his sister's affection, so he just hugged her tighter and hoped tomorrow would be better. "Danny," Jazz whispered softly while shaking his shoulder. "Danny, I think it's time you got up." Danny whined in his throat as he gargly blinked his open eyes, slowly sitting up from his bed while Jazz stepped back and sit down on her own bed across from him. "What time is it?" Danny asked, scratching his head and swinging his legs out from under the covers onto the floor. "It's nearly 10 in the morning," Jazz replied, and Danny stilled. He hadn't slept in that late since he first got his powers. "Why didn't you wake me up?" Danny asked, anxiously reaching for his phone to check if Peter or Wade had texted him any updates, and was both relieved and concerned when he found none. "You didn't have a great sleep last night," Jazz stated, but it came out in an infinite lip. "You got up to pace around 3 times in the middle of the night. You don't remember?" Danny stiffened as his ghost chill sleeping down his spine. He didn't remember doing that at all. "No, I don't. Sorry for waking you up," Danny apologized, clenching his phone. Jazz opened her mouth briefly before closing it, and sighing, reaching over to ruffle his hair. "It's okay, Danny." Jazz relented. "Why don't you take a shower? You look like you need one." Danny blinked, finally realizing he had slept in his clothes from the day before. His skin felt grimy, his hair was greasy, and his clothes were practically stiff with dried sweat. Ugh. Danny saw it as he wriggled his nose in disgust. Gross. "Why did you let me sleep in my clothes?" Danny groaned as he got up and got his suitcase, unzipping it and gathering some new clothes. "You were a bit out of it when you came back, Danny," Jess said, stiffly, cussing her arms. Danny paused briefly before zipping his suitcase shut and starting to make his way to the bathroom. "Danny!" Jazz tried again, but stopped when he turned to look at her. "Jazz," Danny said, softly, hunching his shoulders. "I know you're worried and you want me to tell you what happened last night, but I don't want to talk about it. Please. Not right now. I'm still trying to sort it out in my head." Jess dropped her hands and walked over to him, giving him a brief hug before pulling back. "All right, Jess said, sadly, as she smoothed her bangs out from his face. Just make sure you talk to someone. It doesn't have to be me, but I'm here if you want me to listen. Thanks, Jess, Danny replied, and she nodded in satisfaction. Are you planning on going anywhere today? She asked, taking a small step back. Not really, Danny answered, as he shrugged with his clothes in his arms. I'll probably stay in the hotel. Just take it easy for today. Good idea, Jazz said. I'll tell Mom and Dad not to bother you until later today. Text me if you decide to go anywhere, okay? Danny nodded, letting Jazz ruffle his hair one last time before he slipped into the bathroom to take a shower. He didn't notice Jazz glancing over at the nightstand and picking up his phone. By the time Danny was done with his shower, Jazz had left to go talk to their parents and explore more attractions. He deposited his dirty clothes in a plastic bin he stored in the hallway closet, then crawled back into his bed while grabbing his phone off the nightstand. He checked for any new text messages from either Peter or Wade, and bit his lip when he found none. The ghostly chill he had felt earlier came back, making him shiver. Danny dragged himself over to his suitcase to pull out a dark hoodie and swiftly ducked inside, flipping the hood up and shaking the long sleeves to cover up his hands before settling on top of the covers and trying to figure out what to do. He should probably find something to eat, but it felt like too much of a hassle to try when he didn't feel hungry. He debated going to his parents and seeing if he could borrow one of their laptops to play Doomed, but decided it wasn't worth getting pulled into helping them when they're cannibalizing the phones and tablets from the other day into new ghost tech. He decided to try and watch TV, hoping something interesting was on one of those limited channels. Danny grabbed the remote on the nightstand, clicking the power button, and then started to flip through the channels. He was about to call it quits when he stumbled upon a news channel and froze at the scrolling headline at the bottom of the screen. Police still baffled by sonic boom heard across New York City. And we're back with updates from the police on the mysterious sonic blast that occurred last night, a newswoman stated, shuffling some papers on the desk. Officials have discovered what they think is the origin point of the blast at an abandoned shipyard at Little Nabe Bay. We have Brett Bruno reporting live on the scene. Brett? The shot changed from inside the news studio to a smartly dressed newsman standing in front of a yellow crime scene tape and blocked off chain fence that surrounded the shipyard, the abandoned warehouses in the background. Thank you, Melinda, Brett replied, as the camera changed focus to the shipyard in the background. Around 8 o'clock last night, a sonic blast was heard through uptown New York City and upper areas of Bronx. Now, police officials were able to deduce the origin of the blast based on calls from witnesses who had personally proper damage and were awake during the event. The camera cut to shots in the street lined with cars that had broken or cracked windows, glass littering the ground like glitter, before going to Brett reviewing a support residence. It was like a punch, a wall of air just going through me, a middle-aged man said, standing next to a shop window that was spiderwebbed with cracks. Next thing I know, car alarms are going off and windows are cracked all to hell. The camera changed to another reviewer. It wasn't like a regular boom, a young woman said, her purse hanging from her side while she stood next to the car, the window completely blown out. You see explosions in movies and B shows, and those are quick. They happen real fast. This one felt drawn out. Again, the shot was changed. We thought it was a broken police siren at first, a teenage boy said, hands hanging from his backpack straps with friends standing by his side. Those things can sound pretty spooky, but it was louder than anything we've ever heard. The camera came back to Brett in front of the shipyard. So when police investigate the area, they found evidence of a struggle and quarantined the area off as a crime scene, Brett stated to the viewers. We were told that while blood was found at the shipyard, a body has yet to be discovered, or any victims with excessive energies checked into nearby hospitals. However, what has the police baffled is lack of evidence to suggest what even caused the blast in the first place. A shot of the Queen City Police chief standing behind a podium in front of a station appeared on screen, depicting part of the public press release. After combing the area, the police chief intoned, "We have found no evidence to suggest a bomb or a device of any sort was used, causing a blast loud enough to be heard by nearly half of New York City. As such, we're encouraging any witnesses who have not previously come forward to tell us what they can about the incident. We ask you for your continued participation as we determine the cause of this blast. Thank you." The TV continued to drone out, but Danny's head was starting to fill with the static in his core, starting to vibrate, because that couldn't be right. They had left Vale passed out cold at the shipyard. Even if anyone didn't immediately investigate the area after they were gone, Vlad should have been found fairly quickly and taken to the hospital. Unless he wasn't there to be found. Danny paused, jumped as he started to panic, getting off the bed and pacing as he tried to think of who Vlad would take a shot at his hazard state. Vlad wouldn't take a chance with Mom, Dad, or Jazz. They all wore anti-possession devices on them at all times, and his parents were never without at least 3 ecto weapons. That left Peter and Wade. It had to be Wade. Peter's senses would have given him on edge, but Wade's still recovering, and Fiddle wouldn't be able to warm him sufficiently. If Vlad tried to attack, Danny raced to his phone and immediately typed out a message. To expired puddle. Where are you? And please tell me you're with Peter. From expired Peter. Hey, Home Slice. Peter went to visit his aunt, and I'm getting supplies. To expired puddle. Are you kidding me right now? Don't you guys watch the news? Go back to the safe house. Now. I'll be there in 10. From expired puddle. Danny, what's going on? To expired puddle. Just get there, or I swear to God I will search the entire city if I have to. From expired puddle. All right. Jeez. Danny quickly shuffled his first wallet and his phone in his hoodie, jamming his feet into his shoes, and raced down the hallway to the staircase, taking 2 steps at a time. He busted through the door and slowed to an energetic walk as he made his way into the lobby. His heart was racing in his chest. When he saw his parents sitting in the front of the lobby TV, the news channels from early on the screen, and relaying other news, Danny nearly turned around to take one of the emergency exits out to the street, but took a breath when he realized now would possibly be a good time to give them an excuse so he could go out for a few hours. He doubled back behind a wall and was about to walk in front of them when he heard their voices. Do you think it was that ghost? Mom murmured sharply. Dad sighed softly. Could be, Dad answered, making sure to keep his voice low. We don't know many ghosts that have a ghostly wail. On the other hand, Phantom is known for staying at Amity Park. There was a brief, strained silence before Mom spoke again. I hate this, she said crisply. I hate it. Danny's breath hitched. Why is this ghost so fixed on our family, Jack? Why can't it just stay in the ghostly zone where it belongs? More static filled Danny's head, and he felt something in his ghost core splinter off. And he brought one of his hands to his chest to clench at his hoodie in discomfort. Later, Danny thought, as the static increased in pitch, and he unconsciously slipped into invisibility. I'll think about it later. Danny didn't quite remember anything that happened on his way to the safe house. If he stayed invisible, if he changed forms or flew, or if he bumped into anyone on the street. He just remembered walking out of the hotel with static in his ears at his core pulsating regularly, and then he was standing in front of the door of the apartment building. He phased through the door into the lobby, keeping invisible, under wraps around him like a cloak before making it to the stairway. Once he was sure that it was empty, he went ghost and flew through the floor until he got to the correct level, facing through the hallway door and finding the correct unit, and then phased through that door too and turned visible. "Ah!" Wade yelled as he jolted in one of the kitchen chairs, the chip bowl he had in his hands, spitting into the table, and Fiddle hovering impulsively above his head. "What have I told you about scaring me half to death?" Danny blinked in confused, the static fading away from his core, thumbed at a lower pitch. Wade was wearing his Deadpool mask with the bottom rolled up past his mouth, but instead of his suit, he wore a plain t-shirt under a worn-out leather jacket, and a pair of jeans, and dark combat boots. He showed no signs of being merely disembodied from the other night before. In fact, he was picture of cheerful as he scooped the chips back into the bowl and continued to eat them. "You okay?" Danny asked, breathlessly. And Wade stopped eating to tilt his head in bewilderment, with his hands still on the bowl. "Yes?" Wade answered, questioningly, raising a handful of chips to his mouth. "Why wouldn't I be?" Danny swallowed at his ghostly core finally relaxed. "Okay," Danny exhaled, as he changed back, falling slightly backwards onto the floor with his legs gave out, while Fiddle let a chirp of alarm. "I think I need to sit down." Wade instantly shoved the bowl to the edge of the table and leaped out of his chair to go to Danny's side. "Danny," Wade said urgently, as he kneeled down, Fiddle trailing behind. "Hey, Homesize, talk to me. What's going on?" "Vlad wasn't found at the shipyard when the police blocked it off earlier this morning," Danny gasped out, clutching Wade's hand when he offered it, and pulled himself up, letting Wade lead him to sit at the table. I was scared that he might have tried and attacked you while you were still healing, but you're all right?" "Yeah, Homesize, I'm picture perfect," Wade answered, as he dragged the chip bowl in front of Danny. "I thought Peter told you about my mutation." Danny nodded, absent-mindedly, bringing a small handful of chips to his mouth. "He did," Danny answered, swallowing the chip. Fiddle snuggled into his neck. "He said you could heal from anything. I didn't think it would be that quickly, though." Wade sighed as he dragged a hand over his face. "Jesus, Peter," Wade groaned, leaning against the table. "The one time you don't give enough details." "Listen, Danny, my regeneration speed is basically on crack. I don't just heal quickly. I can regrow limbs, or whole organs if I have to too. Not even a bullet to the head can keep me down for long." As soon as the words left Wade's mouth, he flinched, and Danny's eyes widened. Clearly that wasn't something Wade had meant to share. There was a tense silence as Wade straightened and walked over to the fridge, grabbing a beer and popping off the top before he sat down in the opposite chair, while taking a huge swig. Danny gulped and ate another handful of chips, trying to get his thoughts in order while Fido whined, curling more securely around his shoulders. "So," Danny started, watching Wade intensely for unease. "You've died before?" Wade snorted, taking another mouthful of his beer. "Yeah," Wade answered quickly, rolling the bottle between his hands. "Yeah, I've kind of died. A lot." "Well, I've only done it once," Danny tried to joke, "and half-assed at that, so you can beat me to the punch on that one." Wade laughed dubiously, staring at him pensive, while he picked up a label on the bottle. "You know," Wade stated, "when Peter first told me about you, I was excited to meet you. I've never heard of anyone else that came back from the dead." "Didn't really come back alive," Danny replied, reaching up to pet Fido. "You're weirdly okay with this," Wade commented, and Danny chuckled darkly, pushing the bowl of chips to the side and leaning back in his chair. "I've been hearing about ghosts since I was 2 years old," Danny stated, crossing his arms. "I practically grew up around death." "So what?" Wade asked, continuing to peel the label off the bottle. "You're not afraid to die?" "No," Danny answered easily. "I'm terrified of dying, mostly because I don't know what will happen to me. Will I continue on as Phantom? Or will I just imprint on a shade? Will I still remember my friends if I become full of ghosts? Will I stay me? But that doesn't mean I don't understand or Don't accept death. Everyone dies, Wade. Some just take a little longer than others. Wade hummed thoughtfully. Even ghosts? Wade asked. Danny smiled, critically. Even ghosts. Danny nodded, playing with the strings of his hoodie. My friend Sam is a goth. She likes to research other cultures, ideas about death. She told me that in some places, they believe that the living forget the memories of the dead, then the souls experience a second death in the afterlife, and they're gone for good. It's sort of true. I've never seen it happen to a specter myself. But some of the other ghosts have told me that if a ghost's core gets destabilized enough, or if they can't control their obsession, they just fade out of existence. It was quiet for a moment, as the implications sank in. Even Fiddle was uncharacteristically somber as he slid down Danny's chest and into his hands. Do you remember what it was like? Danny asked after a moment, keeping his attention on Fiddle as he continued to play around with his hoodie strings. What it felt like when you died? Wade stilled for a moment before pulling the bottle to his lips and taking a swig. Usually it hurts. Not a lot of ways to die peacefully, Wade answered as he settled the bottle on the table. But sometimes it's a relief. Danny jerked his head up and found Wade had pulled his mask and thrown it on the table. His entire face was covered in scars and stretched all along his head and snaked down his throat and under the neckline of his t-shirt. These scars aren't just demonstrations, Danny. Sometimes they're pure agony, or sometimes the thoughts in my head are too loud and I can't make sense of things. Other times, I'm just tired of doing the same shit on a different day. And I hope the next bullet I put in my brain will stick. Danny flinched, and Fiddle rushed to nuzzle Wade's chest in comfort. Wade paused, slowly lifting his hands, Fiddle floating up to it and plopping down on Wade's palm. Wade squinted, like he was trying to see something, and then gently rubbed the thumbs along Fiddle's back. Having Peter around helps, Wade continued. Hell, having you and Fiddle around helps. It still doesn't change the fact that ever since my mutation activated, death was my only source of relief for a long time. Danny bit his lip, hugging his arms. I've never really thought about it like that, Danny whispered. My mom and dad always talk about death like it's the end, even though they study ghosts. I've always thought that it was just starting over. I mean, it's called the afterlife for a reason, right? Wade snickered softly. Why don't your parents believe in the afterlife if they study ghosts? Wade asked, and Danny stiffened. I don't know, Danny answered, nervously, while struggling. I think it's because they don't think of ghosts as a sentient, just echoes of people. Well, that's BS if I've ever heard it, Wade replied, while he continued to pet Fido. After a moment, Wade jolted as the thought occurred to him. Danny? Wade asked, worriedly. Do you remember what it felt like when you died? Danny shivered, hunched his shoulders. Yeah, Danny breathed, and Wade froze as his jaw dropped. Even Fido ruffled his ectoplasm body nervously. It was like, have you ever seen people cook hot dogs? Use like an electric outlet? It felt like that, like I was being cooked from the inside out. And then there was this wall of ectoplasm. It felt like I was bathing in acid. That's what caused my that's what killed me in the end, I think. But it's also what brought me back, I guess. I got so much of it in my system that it changed me. Wade closed his mouth and swallowed, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I'm sorry you have to remember that, Wade finally stated. Danny took a breath and rested his head on his arms as he leaned forward on the table. Yeah, Danny mumbled. Me too. Wade straightened further in his chair, stock covering his face. Danny, what do you mean Wade started, but Danny cut him off. Hey, Wade, Danny asked softly. Do you think I'm a bad person?
What?
Wade asked, incredulously, straightening in his chair and nearly dropping Fido.
Danny, where the hell is this coming from? You're like on Peter's level of goodness, okay? And he takes his time out on patrol to get cats out of trees.
I don't know. Danny stiffened, his eyes getting wet, and Fido made a beeline to duck his head and burrow in his chin while he whined. It's just, sometimes I wish I had just died in that stupid accident. Maybe if I was full ghost, I would understand why my parents hate me so much. Wade clenched his hands.
Danny,
Wade said seriously, if your parents are hurting you because you're a mute, metahuman, Dade interrupted, sulkingly, making Wade sputter in confusion. Meta is slang for metahuman, a human who has the T-activated gene. My friends and I looked it up after the incident.
What the hell does it matter?
Wade yelled as he stood up.
It doesn't give your parents the right to hurt you.
They aren't hurting me, Danny yelled back, lifting his head from the table while Fido whimpered. And it's all that matters. Don't you get it, Wade? Whatever happened in that accident didn't just change a part of me. It changed all of me. I'm not a mutant because I'm not human anymore. Wade stomped over and hauled at Danny by the hoodie, gripping his shoulders and tilting his face so that they were looking at each other. I don't care what you are, Wade told him sternly, as Fido silently hovered above them. You could be an alien from outer space, and it still wouldn't matter to me or to Peter. To us, you'll always be that dorky kid with a malicious stake that's trying to be a hero, and that will always be enough for us. You're not human. So what? That doesn't make you a monster. Danny's eyes got blurry as his breath hitched, and he hid his face in Wade's chest as he started to cry. I don't understand, Wade. What did I do? Danny sobbed, bringing his arms up to wipe his face with his sleeves. I'm trying to help. I've always just trying to help, so why do they hate me so much? Wade hesitantly pulled him into a tighter hug, gently rubbing his shoulders as Fido crooned surgically while wiggling themselves under Danny's chin. Wade's silence was Danny's only answer. From DP 1.0. Whatever plans you had for Danny, you better kick into overdrive. To DP 1.0. What happened? From DP 1.0. I'll tell you about it later. Just talk to him tomorrow. ASAP. Typing ... Typing ... To DP 1.0. I think I know what this is about. From DP 1.0. How did you know? To DP 1.0. I'll tell you about it later. Peter gawed his lips as he reread Wade's text on the subway, dread slowly forming in his gut, and switched to a text he got earlier this morning. From Unknown. Hey, Spider-Man? My name is Jasmine, and I am Danny's older sister. I wanted to thank you for looking after my brother. These first couple of days we've been here are the happiest I've ever seen him. It looks like he finally has someone to talk to. I know this is probably a lot to ask, but please, do whatever you can to help him. I know he doesn't say much about our hometown, but it could get pretty bad there. Really bad. I guess that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, again. Peter swayed as the subway took a turn, exiting out with a text app and opening a web browser. He was going to have to tread very carefully if he wanted to pull this off. That was an emotional episode, wasn't it? It was an emotional chapter. It was very emotional. Not the most emotional, though. I had a hard time recording Danny crying, mainly because as I started recording the voice lines for Danny crying and me doing the cracky crying voice, I went to go do the narration of that part, and all of a sudden I'm like, why is my voice cracky? And then I'm like, oh my god, my vision is getting blurry. What's happening? I was crying. I started to legitimately cry. This happens to me sometimes when I'm acting. I literally start to actually feel said emotion. I like to think of it as part of my method acting. I think that's the technique called. Whatever. Something I want to touch upon is in this show, I don't think it is ever touched, at least not that I'm aware of. I was in season 2 last time I checked. In the Danny Phantom show, I don't think it was ever checked out that Danny actually died. And here I really like the implications that he literally died and he's not human anymore. He's a halfa, basically. Like, I love that implications. Love it so much. Appreciate it. A shark's reading glasses. You were cooking and I'm eating it up. You were cooking and I'm eating it up. As always, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Join our community Discord server, link in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.